Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first grand event for PNUC Renewable Energy Cooperative. You're the first group, and we're really pleased and excited to have everyone here today, and I hope you find this event. I know we're living in interesting times, certainly now, but we will live in, it's going to be really interesting in the next several years as well. So I'm excited. My name's Dave Arkell. I'm actually the chairman of the PNUC Renewable Cooperative. If you hadn't seen before, we have a board, and I'm going to ask the board members if they could please stand up so you can see who's here. So I want to thank them for all the time and effort they put in. We have about 80 members in this cooperative. And our goal is actually to help the community and surrounding community to help out in the sustainable practices. And our role certainly was putting in the solar panels on the ceiling here that you can see. It's 60 kilowatts. But the intent is to actually continue to spread the word and to make people aware that actually this is just good business practices. This is not about just being green. It's just good business, and we're really pleased because we believe businesses have a big part to play, and we know once they're well educated, and you're going to see from some of the presentations today that it pays off massive dividends. So I want to also mention I want to thank all our sponsors. Without them, quite frankly, we probably wouldn't be here. To be clear and to be specific, I want to thank our gold sponsor, Enbridge, and also KN Crowder Manufacturing as a silver sponsor. And there's a bunch of bronze sponsors. You'll see them in the middle of your table. There's a variety of sponsors that are involved in this. So without further ado, I'd like to make introductions. I'm really excited. Most Canadians we're not very boastful, and I'm excited because we have a gentleman here who's a Canadian, but he's known around the world for his thought and his area of expertise in sustainability. And so let me just share with you about Bob. So Bob is a leading expert in quantifying and selling the business value of corporate sustainability and strategies, and has given over 1,300 presentations to corporate government, universities, and NGOs. He has 6 books, 2 DVDs, business case toolkits, and extensive master slide decks provide further capacity building resources for sustainability champions. I can just tell you, because we have worked with Bob with some of our clients, and the amount of interest and intrigue after he spoke was unbelievable. So here's the interesting part. That Bob's background, he worked 34 years for IBM and retired in 2000. He serves on the board of the Future Fit Foundation, the B Corp Standard Advisory Council. He was inducted into the International Society of Sustainability Professionals Hall of Fame in 2011. He received Clean 50 awards in 2015 and 2017 and has earned 6 Best of the World overall and 5 Best for the World Community Awards since becoming a certified B Corporation in 2012. Pretty impressive. He is a ISSP certified sustainability professional and is a Future Fit certified professional and an accredited partner, and received his PhD in sustainability from the University in Toronto in 2005. His purpose, and we all need a purpose in life, is to ensure his 3 children and his 3 grandchildren have a quality of life is at least as good as what he has enjoyed. So certainly, I look forward, Bob. Thank you so much for coming, and I think you'll really get a lot out of this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, good morning. The intent is to share with you some of the things that are being shared with the business community as a whole in Canada. A few years ago, but 2 or 3 years ago, Natural Resources Canada became increasingly concerned that the natural resources sector in particular was not ready for climate change. So they put out a tender to help train, educate boards and executives, the executive team of companies in Canada, on what's going on and some ideas on what they should be doing about it. The organization that won that tender was CPA Canada, Chartered Professional Accountants Canada. And I had the opportunity to work with them on putting together these briefings, these one-hour briefings for executives and board members, especially for the natural resources sector, but it applies to any sector. As you know, the natural resources sector, especially the energy, forestry, and mining sectors, are very, very, very important to Canada's economy. And if they're not ready for climate change, Canada's economy is not ready for climate change. So we need to make sure that we're doing the right things to get ready. So the intent of this session this morning is to share with you the kind of material that we're sharing with them. And I use this with boards, I use this with executives and so on, and it applies to anybody. So what I'm going to be doing is using part of the slide deck that we would normally use with them. The flow of this is pretty straightforward. Give a little bit of information about the fact that something's going on with science from the science point of view, and then so what from a business perspective in general, and then zero in a little bit closer to some of the things that might be relevant to your business as well. So let's start with the science. You've probably heard a lot about this anyway, and it's probably not news to you. There has been some empirical evidence that something's been going on. So scientists are adding some other data points to this research and coming to some conclusions that are fairly important. It's just that they're having a tough time being heard. We, for the last 30 years, have had reports from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that we need to start to be much more careful about the emissions that we are putting into the atmosphere. And we haven't really been taking the appropriate steps. So last year they put out a report which was sort of their final warning. It was a very specific report. Usually the reports are couched in probabilities. This one wasn't. This kind of just laid it out. And they said, if we don't do what you see on that slide, it's not going to be good. So we need to reduce our carbon emissions significantly in the next 10 years and get rid of all of them by 2050. That's huge. So that means that we have to do things differently, and we need governments to step up to this as well. So as you know, there have been gatherings of folks, governments and others, on this for a while, and there was a big gathering in Paris, ending up with the Paris Agreement, and the Paris Agreement came up with that. So the Paris Agreement said that we would limit our global average temperature increase above pre-industrial levels to no more than 2 degrees and aim for 1.5 degrees by 2100. So look at the dates. They're talking about 2100. The IPCC is talking about 2050. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that the IPCC is talking about 1.5 degrees. Paris Agreement is talking about 2 degrees. So as usual, you get out of sync on how these claims are being made and how these encouragements are being phrased in terms of the dates by which and also the amounts by which things are going to happen. So there's some confusion around all of this. And all of the countries that went to the Paris Agreement meeting brought with them pledges as to what they would be doing. So it's basically the same one that was there with the previous government. The Conservative government and the Liberal government are really in sync, at least on this. So it's 30% below 2005 levels by 2030. 30% below 2005, not 2010 levels, by 2030. That's not good enough. It's just not good enough. And it turns out that they're not alone in coming up with pledges that are not going to actually do what needs to be done. So if you were to take a look at the difference between this 1.5 and 2 degrees thing, is this a big deal? It's a big deal. The relationship between the effects and the degree of temperature is not linear. is very, very significant. If we get above 2 degrees, we don't know what's going to happen. And unfortunately, if you take all of the pledges that were made relative to the temperature increase that we are currently experiencing, and you've kind of plotted it. So this pre-industrial level, pre-industrial means like below 250 years ago, before the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. That started with the perfection of the steam engine by James Watt, and we tapped into the enormous power of fossil fuels. So pre-industrial average, and it goes back to about 1850 as well. We're at about 1.5 degrees above that average temperature for the world right now. Last year was about 1 degree, 1.0, now it's about 1.1. The Paris Agreement had the two goals, the 1.5 or 2 degrees that they were talking about. And the pledges that were brought by people look like they're going to, unfortunately, cause us to significantly exceed that, up in the 3.5 range. That's not good. And by the way, at current course and speed, if we don't change what we're doing, not even meet those pledges, we'll be up to 4, maybe 6 degrees by 2100. That is unlivable. So that's not acceptable. So what we need to do is try to figure out what the heck we're going to do, not only in preventing that increase from happening, but also getting ready for the fact that the probability of us keeping it within 1.5 degrees is looking slimmer and slimmer. So that means we need to get ready for it, as well as try to prevent it. So the language that's around that is usually called mitigation and adaptation. And on the left-hand side, you see the mitigation part, which is that we need to stop emitting as much as we're emitting, greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, and so on. And on the other side, it says we need to get ready for the fact that there's a pretty good chance that we're not going to be able to do what needs to be done. So then what? What are we going to do? And that's the adaptation part. Usually we look at both, but today we're looking especially at the adaptation part, not so much the mitigation part. Some other time we can talk about what we need to do on that side, but really, so something looks like it's going to be happening despite the best promises and pledges that are being made by the people who are supposedly in charge, and we need to kind of get our heads around that. That's the science. We could talk for about 3 hours on this. I'm not going to. That's the science. The science says we have a problem. We need to do things that we've never thought about having to do before. And the odds of us being able to pull that off are not looking as good as they should. So, what are you going to do? That's the question. You should also realize that the awareness of this is nowhere close to what it is. Right now, we're in the middle of a COVID-19 problem. We get daily updates on how it's going. This is called an emergency. It's a pandemic. There are more and more governments that are declaring that we are in an emergency on climate change, but we're not treating it like an emergency. We don't get daily updates on how it's going and so on. And I think a lot of what's going on with the COVID-19 handling by the governments around the world and so on, and the experts, in the case of COVID-19, they're medical people. In the case of climate change, it's scientists, climate scientists, need to have a little bit more airtime. The fact is that climate change, because it's in the atmosphere, the carbon dioxide and so on, is a global problem. So we all need to work on this, and that's the challenge of trying to get governments all over the world and businesses and all of us all over the world to realize that we have to do things differently. And basically, the answer to this is we have to electrify everything, maximize its efficiency, and power it with low-impact renewable energy. How's it going? So that's kind of where we're at. So climate-related risks and opportunities for businesses. So let's just take a look at this. There are a bunch of economists that get together every year, and they take a look at what's on the horizon for the economies, the large corporations and so on of the world. And they put together a report, which is called Global Risks. In this case, it was 2020, the one that came out this year. They've been doing this for about 16 years, I guess. And every year, there's a gathering of the who's who on the planet in Davos, Switzerland. It's called the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. How many have heard of that? Okay, so this is where all the rich and famous and powerful people get together, the prime ministers and the kings and the movie stars and the CEOs and people that have a lot of influence, a lot of power. They all get together sort of for a how's it going meeting. And before that, they put out a report, the World Economic Forum does. This is a report that is put together by about 1,000 economists from all walks of life all over the world. They're in academia, they're in government, they're in business, they're in the finance sector as well. And what they do is they take a look 10 years out and they say, what's on the horizon that might cause us some problems? What are the risks or threats on the horizon to economies in the next 10 years that we should be careful about? And they slice and dice them into the likelihood of them happening and the impact if and when they were to happen. This is the upper right-hand quadrant of the 2x2 matrix that they come up with that shows that we have a few things that have the likelihood of being of happening within the next 10 years and the impact being the most severe. And interestingly, they color code them all, and the green ones are environmental, and you'll notice that the biggest threat to the economies of the world, at the time they put this together anyway, is climate change. So this is the WEF. This is not the WWF, right? This is not about the polar bears. This is about the economies. And what they're saying is climate change could be the biggest threat to the economies of the world. And you can see that there are other related things like extreme weather and climate action failure and biodiversity loss and natural disasters, et cetera. And then there are other things in red which are social, like water crisis. Over on this side, which you don't see, is another one, which is the food crisis. And they're all connected together. So at your tables, you have a handout, a series of handouts. And one of the ones in behind the feedback form, maybe you could just pull out because it's a little bit more visible than anything I could give you up here. So one side is the entire figure. It's got all four quadrants in the 2x2 matrix. And you can see that there are some other candidates on there too, but they're just not in the high likelihood, high impact of happening in the next 10 years. By the way, you'll notice that there's one that sort of sticks out there called infectious diseases. At the time they put this together, there is a low likelihood of an infectious disease spreading around the world. I think if they were to put this together today, it might be positioned a little bit differently. Anyway, what you're seeing there is the whole picture. So there are a lot of things that are important, just not quite as important as this one. To see how they all connect to each other, flip it over. And what you'll see on the flip side is the way in which, of course, these are related to each other. And you'll notice that one of the ones in the middle is the climate action failure, the fact that we are not doing what we need to do on climate. And of course, that impacts extreme weather. It impacts involuntary migration, and we're seeing more and more evidence of that. Biodiversity loss, global governance failure, who's in charge of the world and how's it going so far? So all of those kinds of things, you can start to see the connections. And you'll also see on that side an echo of what I showed on the previous slides. So this is a handout that you can take with you, and it's just a reminder that it's not the only problem on the horizon, it's just the most important one from a business perspective. So the economists are basically echoing what climate scientists are saying, which is, you know, something's going on. We could kind of benefit from doing something about that. So that's a reminder that there are business implications of all of this. There is a way of looking at all of these that organizes the risks around physical risks, transition risks, and some of the opportunities that may be associated with the transition as well. So it's not all doom and gloom. It's not all just risks. There are some opportunities that smart companies can take advantage of as well. But get used to the language. The word transition just came up. Transition means getting off fossil fuels, getting onto renewable energy. It's just fancy words for that. So it's how the heck do we do that? And what are the risks associated with that transition? And then we have some other language here, acute and chronic, associated with Physical risks. So physical risks, these are pretty straightforward. Acute, sudden, bad storms, that kind of stuff. You're familiar with these things. These are just pictures from different things that have happened in Canada in the last couple of years. And then we have chronic ones. These are more gradual. They are not events per se, although you end up with wildfires on the West Coast, for example, that have been triggered by the fact that there are chronic problems going on with the forests in Western Canada. And as you probably know, that they've always had forest fires, but they're more severe these days, more extensive. And the reason is because a lot of the trees are dead. It's just sort of vertical kindling waiting for a spark. And why are they dead? Well, it turns out that the pine beetle is taking over a lot of those forests. And why is that happening? It's because the larva isn't being killed in the wintertime the way it used to be. And why is that happening? Because the winters aren't cold enough. So what you end up with is a whole series of events that get connected in an unfortunate way, which have their origins in what's going on with climate change. And as you can see, it's a color-coded map. The highest increases are already happening in northern Canada. The highest in the world, by the way, are already happening in northern Canada. So, yeah, stuff is going on. And some of it is sudden, and that gets the news and the headlines. And there's other stuff which is a little bit more insidious and a little bit more gradual. So those are the two kinds of risks, acute and chronic. They're kind of expensive. These big weather events, especially for insurance companies, are causing them significant grief. And it looks like they're becoming more frequent and more severe. And by the way, that's the thing about climate change. It's not that this stuff never happened before. It's just the frequency and the severity of it is higher. So the implications from the point of view of business are pretty straightforward. Of course, there's insurance implications, as you might expect. Demand for products and services, especially if they're deemed as being products and services that might be contributing to the problem or not mitigating the problem enough. Capital expenditure decisions, what you're going to invest in or not invest in, who you merge with, and so on. And then you get into the fundamental question of business continuity and resilience. Are you going to be able to weather the storms associated with all of this? So that's a bit of a sobering kind of thing. Now, if you're an investor investing in a company, you would kind of like to make sure, or a banker loaning to a company, you'd like to kind of make sure that you're going to get your money back. That the company's going to be around to pay it back. Otherwise, they're a risky investment. So the investment community is starting to ask some interesting questions about all of this. And there was a study last year, and this was in Canada, about the fact that they need to be a little bit better informed about how things are going on some of these things so that they can make a better balanced decision on whether they're going to invest in you. And it turns out that they're becoming more and more aware that this climate-related financial data is important. And other members of the financial community in Canada also are starting to clue into this as well. The Bank of Canada every year puts out a report on the health of the financial system in Canada, and they said that climate change is a key vulnerability in the Canadian financial system. And then the folks that look after the stock markets in Canada also did a report, and they said that issuers, that's the companies that are putting out their stock, must disclose any climate change related risks that are material to their business. In other words, are you exposed? So we just want to know that, so tell us that. And then there was another report done by a task force expert panel that went on to kind of reinforce this, that climate change opportunity and risk management need to become business as usual in financial services and embedded in everyday business decision, and that they want to have TCFD-like disclosures. How many have heard of the TCFD? Anybody? Okay, so companies are starting to clue into what this is all about, because there was a report that was put out with the long, long title of the task force on climate-related financial disclosures. You recognize the two guys on either side? Either of them? So Bloomberg's the guy on the right, on the left rather. He was asked by the guy on the right to head up this task force because he's very familiar with what's going on in the stock market and so on, other than his political aspirations. But anyway, he was asked to head up this task force. Who's the guy on the right? Carney, right, our guy. So he used to be in charge of the Bank of Canada, then he was in charge of the Bank of England, now he's moving to a UN position where he's trying to activate interest in the finance community on this topic of climate change. He's a force. Anyway, he's the guy that's in charge also not only of the Bank of England, but of the Financial Stability Board for the world. And he was becoming more and more uneasy about the fact that businesses aren't understanding that this is serious. So he commissioned this report, this task force. And what they came up with is a recommendation that businesses voluntarily, I love the term voluntary, well, they voluntarily emit their climate-related financial disclosures. So what they need to do is report on what that is, disclose, report on how they're doing on this stuff, and provide decision-useful information to lenders, insurers, and investors so that they can evaluate the risks and exposures over the short, medium, and long term. Fancy words. What he's saying is, we want to make sure that we're protecting our assets. We don't want to put our money into a company that's at risk. And do you even know you're at risk? So what they would like companies to do is just tell them 4 simple things. How are you setting up your governance structure to make sure that you're taking a look at this and including this in all of your considerations as business as usual kinds of things that you should look at among all of the other things you're looking at? So your governance around climate-related risks and opportunities, are you looking at that from a board level? Second thing is, how are your strategies, your short and long-term strategies, looking at the potential impacts of climate-related risks and opportunities on your business model, on your strategy, and so on? How's that looking so far? Risk management. How do you identify and assess and manage climate-related risks? How are you doing that? You got scenario plans? What happens if have you got something that says if it goes up by 1.5 degrees, what you're going to do? Or 2 degrees, what you're going to do? Or 3 degrees, what are you going to do? Have you got that kind of thing? Just like to see it, please. This is driving businesses nuts because they've never really thought about it before, and they don't know how to do it. So there are a lot of people that are trying to figure out how to help them on that. But if you're an investor, you need to know this so that you can make a more informed decision as to whether you're going to put your money into that company. And then metrics and targets, how to keep track of all of this. So are you keeping track of it? And are you able to assess progress on this? So what they're really talking about is a different mindset in the investment community, the banking community, the insurance community. And this set of recommendations is being picked up by a lot of different organizations, very, very powerful, very, very influential organizations. So it's not just somebody on the other side of the pond that's doing this kind of thinking. This is pervasive, global now. So this is the new lens that businesses are being subjected to by folks from whom they are looking for capital. And we live in a capitalist system. Capital is very important, and you need to look good to the people who provide capital, called banks and investors. So if they think this is important, it's important. So there's more and more going on around all of this. So one of the ways that they suggest companies report this or take a look at it is they take a look at the risk, they take a look at the opportunities, they put it through some strategic risk management kind of algorithms, and come up with a financial impact both on the income side and on the balance sheet side. Fancy words. And in your handout, there is another one that gives you a sense of how they might do that, a tool that could be useful to them. What I'm referring to is this one. So it's got a repeat of the slide that you see up there on the screen, but what it's doing is it's taking parts of it and show how they relate to a tool that basically helps companies frame all of that information in a decision-useful format of a capital expenditure request form, basically. But it's a way in which companies can assess what's in it for them if they were to actually do things that they're not already doing. So it helps them assess the wisdom of doing that. The tool that's referred to, by the way, on the extreme column on the left is the Sustainability ROI Workbook, which is a free open source tool that's available on my website if you're interested, and it helps you put some numbers around all of this stuff. So there are tools out there that are available. On the flip side, there's a starter set of risks and opportunities that you might want to include in your considerations. So there is a lot of help that companies can have as they start to grapple with making disclosures that previously they didn't have to worry about. Into the home stretch. So what are the implications for folks that are in business? There is a strong temptation to think it's someone else's problem. That we're not getting a lot of tornadoes in the GTA these days. We're not getting a lot of hurricanes. So, you know, it's too bad that these things happen to other people, and we really do feel for them, but not so much here. So it's always like somebody else is going to get hit. We're not getting hit by forest fires, so, you know, what's the problem? But unfortunately, this is a global issue, and the indirect impacts of some of these things can be almost more severe than the direct impacts. And these are some of the kinds of things that might be worth considering. So you may be asked for information that you weren't asked about before, those kinds of climate-related financial disclosures. You may think that it's a pain in the neck to have to fill that out, but if your investors are genuinely uneasy about whether or not you're ready for some of the things that they think you should be ready, then it's voluntary. I mean, if you if you want the money, maybe you should tell them. And if you don't want the money, you don't have to. So it's voluntary. Implications of evaluating all of this stuff. So it touches all of the important systems and processes that companies thrive on. And the stakeholder engagement part. Stakeholders, that's a nice umbrella term. It includes not only shareholders, if you're a publicly traded company, but it includes communities, it includes employees, it includes customers and suppliers. So it's a much more inclusive group, and there's more and more evidence that the purpose of organizations these days is more appropriately to maximize the well-being of stakeholders as opposed to maximizing shareholder wealth. So there's a little bit of evolution taking place in higher parts of the corporate world around all of this purpose stuff too, which is good. So a third handout, which is sort of a checklist of things that you might want to take a look at. So there's a little form that gives you a chance to kind of self-assess how ready you are and whether your processes are ready for these kinds of things. So there are 10 things here. It's the consolidation of about 150 down into 10. And it kind of gives you a sense of some of the things you might be looking at. And you can self-assess on whether or not you're already doing that, or you're doing a little bit, or got that nailed, and that's the 3 columns that are on the right. And you can decide after that as to whether or not some of these things are worthy of your attention more than they already have been, and whether some of these might be on the short list of things that you might want to think about tomorrow. So this is a checklist of best practices around how to make sure that you are doing the right governance management kinds of things on climate change. There's a slightly different version for directors, but this is the executive one, and it gives you a chance down at the bottom to capture some of the action plans. There are references in the questions to organizations that you might want to join with who are trying to do some of the kinds of things that we're talking about. Some of them are on the back. Some of them are Canadian. Some of them are international groups. But it's just a reminder that you're not going to be alone if you decide to do more than you're already doing. There are amazing groups that are working collectively on these issues, helping each other. So if you are concerned that you might be lonely, it's not like that anymore. This is really getting some traction. So that's kind of the backdrop to what's going on. There is lots of information available in other documents. What you see here are some of the ones coming out of CPA Canada. They're doing some really, really good stuff. The third one down, the climate change briefing, questions for directors to ask, is excellent. It's 20 questions that directors should be asking their executives about all of this stuff. It's an echo of the checklist. That was one of the sources for the checklist, actually, which was written by 2 Canadians. And then at the bottom, some more acronyms, TCFD, that's the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, and the Standards Advisory Board, Sustainability Standards Advisory Board, that's the SASB, which is also a helpful organization on all of this. So the reason to show you this is that you should be reassured that if you do intend to do something on this and you're looking for guidance on it, fortunately, we're much better positioned than we would have been 5 or 10 years ago to help you with all of that. So as I said, this is a fairly drinking from a fire hose kind of format for this kind of material. And I encourage you to take a look at the slides, drill down into stuff that is of interest to you, and start taking it seriously. And if after you go through the checklist you say, well, you know what, we're doing what needs to be done, we're okay, maybe there's a different kind of opportunity. Maybe there's a different kind of opportunity for you to take a leadership role in your business community and help others do what they could or should be doing. So, lots of different ways that you can become engaged, and I encourage you to think about the possibilities of doing it in a way that works for you and works for some of the issues that we really do need help on. Governments cannot do this without business help. Totally impossible, especially in North America. So the more we can figure out ways that we can help, I think the better the odds are that we can actually keep the temperature where it should be. Done? Okay, thank you.
So I'll just give you a couple minutes just to take a look at that. This is based on people's response from this. Now, I'm not surprised by the amount of people that are proactive at this, because that's why you're at this breakfast. It's the people that aren't proactive that aren't at this breakfast. So interesting, very interesting results.
Last year in the spring, almost 1 year ago, Burlington Council declared a climate emergency, and they directed staff to apply a climate lens to decision-making, including our budget process, report back with a climate action plan by the end of 2019, and that all our staff reports to Council should have a section called Climate Implications related to the issues that we're dealing with in our reports. But even before the council that we had, the previous council in the strategic plan of 2015 to 2040 included a statement that recognized that climate change is a significant issue and Burlington will work towards being a net carbon neutral community. It also included a target for city operations, including our facilities and our fleet, to be net carbon neutral by 2040. And the council we have right now, as you can see, they're very supportive of climate action with declaring the climate emergency. And I should mention, municipalities around the world have been declaring climate emergencies. It's not just Burlington. I think I saw something on social media yesterday, the town of Clarington just declared a climate emergency. And I think all the municipalities in Halton region have done so, as well as Hamilton. So this council in their work plan, from vision to focus, 2018 to 2022, so it's their work plan for their council term, which directs staff, again, directed us to complete the climate action plan, a climate adaptation strategy, as well as the corporate energy and emissions management plan. So I do want to sort of touch on and bring some of the information that Bob mentioned about how we're being impacted by climate change at a local level and what we can expect, what we're already experiencing and what we can expect more of in the future. Essentially what we say, it's going to be warmer, wetter, and wilder. So the average year-round temperature is increasing. We are experiencing heat waves, and so it's getting warmer. What does that mean for us? But that can really impact our vulnerable populations. There's a whole social equity issue to this. It can impact provide stress on our natural environment, especially water quality. I see more algae blooms. It increases our demand on energy use and requires the natural gas peaking plants to run more often. But, there's people that say, oh, well, it's getting warmer, so we have a longer growing season. Well, yes and no, but sometimes our springs we're seeing can be wetter, more rainfall, which can impact the planting schedule. And summers can be more, warmer, drier, droughts, which again can impact growth. We're seeing more ice events because the average temperature in the winter is sort of creeping up. And with mixed precipitation. Well, what does that mean for us? Well, we're seeing, more slips and falls. It can impact your employees getting to work, and vehicular accidents. The city itself is seeing more freeze-thaw events, cycles. Bob was mentioning that he was test driving an electric vehicle in Scarborough, and he said, well, the road conditions really, showed how the vehicle's handled. Well, there's a reason for that, because the freeze-thaw cycles are increasing more frequently. What we call affectionately the pothole season is expanding, and our infrastructure is taking a beating. And Bob mentioned the different or the higher frequency or intensity of storms. We had our 2014 flood in Burlington. 3,000 homes were flooded in that time. We had 2 months of rainfall in a very short period of time, and it was very localized. We called it a rain bomb, and we're seeing more of that. But that resulted, again, Bob mentioned the insurance companies paying out. That exceeded $90 million in damages. We're also experiencing more windstorms. Back in 2017, maybe some of you remember, there was a transport truck toppled on the Skyway. When the Skyway closes, that causes chaos for Burlington because everyone's trying to get, through and around to the other side. We see damages to private, public property, power outages. In 2018, we had 4 wind events in a very short period of time between April and May, and it cost the city an additional $350,000 in cleanup costs just for that. So just a quick note on our greenhouse gas emissions in Burlington. We do track our energy consumption, both on a corporate level for city operations as well as community-wide, relying on data from Burlington Hydro, Enbridge, and we use transportation fuel sales data for transportation. And I do believe the data we have here underestimates the transportation greenhouse gas emissions that we have in Burlington. 2014, we estimated them to be about 37% of our emissions, and 2018, up to 46%. The rest of the pieces of the puzzle of the pie are really focused on the building emissions. So as I mentioned, Council had required us to develop a climate action plan last year, and we did meet their deadline to report back in December with a draft climate action plan. There are 7 key program areas in the plan. First is low carbon new buildings. So recognizing that although the building code is much more efficient than it used to be, we need to do better and build our new buildings to a lower carbon standard, recognizing those buildings are going to be around for a number of years, and if we don't get it right now, they're not going to be renovated or retrofitted for another 20, 25 years. The second area is deep energy retrofit programs. Again, recognizing we have a lot of existing buildings that energy efficiency needs to be improved, not just the commercial industrial sector, but residential as well. The third area is renewable energy and accelerating the development of renewable energy in our community. And I'm very interested in learning more about the energy cooperative, David, that you're involved in. So maybe we can meet offline sometime to talk about that. The fourth area is electric mobility and equipment. So again, we know that Burlingtonians, we like our vehicles. So how do we encourage, incent, support people to move to electric vehicles? And it's not just the vehicles, it could be e-bikes. I'm seeing a few more e-bikes in town, especially for those of us that are getting a little older and we want to bike longer distances. E-bikes aren't a bad solution. Equipment as well, landscaping equipment. The city is going to be using more electric landscaping equipment this summer, so it'll be a great way to see how that goes and publicize hopefully our success in that area. Some people are saying, well, what about transit and active transportation? Yes, very important. We need, if we want to continue to be the most, livable community in Canada, supporting transit and active transportation will help us continue to be that livable and healthy community. So our Transportation Services Department is working on an integrated mobility plan. They're just getting that off the ground, and that will focus on moving people, not necessarily cars around. So it's a new approach for us to do. The sixth area is waste reduction, and the seventh is industry innovation. The three items you'll see, number 2, 3, and 4, are highlighted because when we did the energy and emissions modeling in our climate action plan, our consultant said these are the 3 areas you really need to focus your efforts on to reduce your carbon footprint in Burlington. But recognizing the other things are important as well, but these are the 3 key areas we need to work on. So as I said, we do track our emissions. This chart shows that the bottom line is the low carbon scenario we want to achieve. Our target is to achieve net carbon neutral as a community by 2050. When our consultant modeled our emissions based on today's technology, they said, you fall short a little bit by 130,000 tons in 2050, but that is based on today's technology. We will continue to review and update this low carbon scenario as we go forward, and hopefully we can close that gap. But it was what I've been trying to say to people today. Let's not focus on 2050 right now. Let's focus on the beginning where we are at 1.2 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions, and build the momentum and accelerate our actions in our community. We can't be business as usual anymore. We need to think long-term and be transformational. And the top line, the red line, I should point out, is business as usual. If we don't implement the climate action plan and do the things we need to do, that's where our greenhouse gas emissions are estimated to stay. So I know we have a lot of businesses in the room today, and I want to recognize that it's not just all about the environment that we're speaking to. And by taking action on some of these things, like supporting deep energy retrofits and accelerating renewable energy, we can create jobs, local jobs in our community. And I look forward to working with many of you in that how can we do what we want to do. And it's not just about City Hall. This is a community plan. So how do we work together? And we do have a number of networks, and I know there's a few people in the room today that are involved in these networks and partnerships. And so we're all trying to work towards these goals. And the other thing, too, by improving energy efficiency and energy savings, we can keep energy dollars in our community instead of them being exported to larger energy companies outside our community. Challenges in our community. I think my pages are a little mixed up. So, yes, it's not going to be easy. We know that. Getting people to change their behavior is a challenge because people like doing the same thing the same way that they've always done. So that's one of the things we need to work on. Vehicles, yes, they're more efficient, but we have more on the road, and people are buying bigger vehicles, and they're driving longer distances. We have a very established natural gas grid in our communities, and the price of oil and gas are dropping, especially recently. That's not really helping our cause to make the business case to switch from fossil fuels. Municipalities, we have limited authority. We are creatures of the province, we like to say, and we are regulated by the province in what we can and cannot do. For instance, a good example is the Ontario Building Code. We cannot regulate above and beyond the building code standards, so we need to look at creative ways to get around that to encourage our developers to build to a low carbon footprint. Alignment with all levels of government is really important. We can't do it on our own. We need senior levels of government to be there with us and supporting us. We have limited ability to raise capital. We rely on property taxes. That's not a progressive tax. That's not tied to income. So, raising property taxes is never a popular thing to do at the local level. But we need to show creativity. We need to show leadership in our community and continue to work with our partnerships and collaborations and networks and keep local jobs or create local jobs and keep our energy dollars in our community. So this is my last slide. So there's a lot going on at City Hall right now. As I mentioned, we are going to be working on a climate adaptation strategy, recognizing that we are being impacted by climate change. Right now, we're just looking at the climate data for Burlington specifically and what the projections are. We'll be looking at the risks and vulnerabilities to our community, not just for city operations, but community-wide as well. So stay tuned. We will be doing workshops throughout the community to work on that. Obviously, implementation of our climate action plan is a key aspect right now. Our council is very interested and supportive in this. We have a couple of partnerships. One key one is with the City of Hamilton and Mohawk College. Tony's in the room, and Mohawk has been fantastic in supporting our partnership. It's called the Bay Area Climate Change Council and Office. And we really look forward to working with this group of people. We have a number of stakeholders. They're at the table, a couple in the room today, Sustainable Hamilton Burlington and Burlington Green, as well as our Burlington Economic Development is one of the key stakeholders on that collective. We'll be hosting roundtable workshops with experts, trying to figure out how do we achieve the actions that we have in our plan. And stay tuned, there'll be more on that. We also, as I mentioned, we have the Corporate Energy and Emissions Management Plan for our own city operations. We are in the process of implementing that, we're currently doing some energy audits of our facilities, looking how we can scale up renewable energy for our own facilities and greening our fleet. The Integrated Mobility Plan is just getting underway. The update to the Urban Forestry Master Plan is starting soon, and an update to our Parks Master Plan, too, for those of you interested. And that's it.
My name is John Lenartz, and I'm with Samuel Son & Company. And I'm going to take you through what Samuel's been doing from a climate change perspective as it relates to energy management. Okay, so I thought I would start off by telling everyone here a little bit about Samuel. You may not be familiar with us, but Samuel is a manufacturer, processor, and distributor of mostly metal and metal products. I say mostly because we do have divisions that produce plastic strapping and also distribute packaging products that aren't made of metal. And we also have divisions that engineer and fabricate systems for material packaging and product ID. We are a fifth generation privately held company. We were established in 1855, and we actually have a member of the sixth generation that currently works within the business. We have over 100 locations, and we broadly classify ourselves as either service center or manufacturing. Within the manufacturing group, we have 8 different divisions. Those divisions produce products such as carbon and stainless tubing, aluminum extrusions, rolled form products, plastic and metal strapping, and engineered and fabricated metal products, including additive metal manufacturing. You might know that as 3D printing. Last year, we spent $22.5 million on our energy spend. We consumed 165 million kilowatt hours, and we consumed about 960,000 gigajoules of natural gas. On a site-by-site basis, our energy consumption ranges from 20,000 to 20 million kilowatt hours, and from less than 100 to 300,000 gigajoules of natural gas. So you can see that we're a very diverse company, not only from a product offering point of view, but from an energy consumption point of view. So why are we pursuing energy management? We have sites that have been doing energy management for 20 years or longer. But from a corporate perspective, it's really only been in the past few years that we've paid attention to it, and it's been mostly focused prior to that on the procurement side of things. So why are we interested in it now? Well, first and foremost, it was a cost savings exercise. But we also realized that by reducing our energy consumption, we could have a positive impact on the environment. We knew that if we could reduce energy, we could reduce the greenhouse gases that were associated with that consumption. Our newly formed CSR program has actual greenhouse gas reduction targets that are tied into our energy reduction targets, as well as other programs that we think will have a positive impact on the environment. These include trying to reduce paper use and eliminating cardboard, styrofoam, cup usage, and water bottle usage at all of our sites. The interesting thing to note about the water bottle usage is that I mentioned we make plastic strapping. Our plant in South Carolina, which makes polyethylene strapping, actually uses almost 100% recycled water bottles as their feedstock for the strap that they produce. We are finding that more and more customers are asking us about what we're doing from an environmental, climate change, greenhouse gas reduction. We get constantly asked to fill out customer surveys. We have larger customers that are requesting that we report through the Carbon Disclosure Project. It's noted, that organization is noted on one of the handouts that Bob made reference to. We've been reporting through there for 3 years. Last year we were asked to report through another similar type agency known as EcoVadis. So our customers are constantly asking us what we're doing about it as they explore their supply chain. The way that we approach energy management, we really are focusing on it as a continuous improvement activity. That helps us engage people from all levels and all disciplines of our organization to get involved. And we're hoping that our CSR program and initiatives will help differentiate us when it comes to trying to attract and retain employees. So when we talk about energy management at Samuel, we look at 2 things. We believe it's the efficient use of energy, but also energy supply management or procurement. And while those 2 programs at Samuel are managed by 2 different groups, they're not mutually exclusive. And with the overlap that we see in the program and with the 2 programs working in concert, then we truly believe that energy can be managed effectively. And as my little buddy up there likes to say, if you save energy, you can save money and you can save the planet. So I mentioned that we had sites that have been doing energy management for 20 years. The corporate focus had really been on the procurement side of things. But in 2016, we revitalized a corporate energy management team. We have about 9 people currently on that team. And that led to an expansion of what we call our corporate energy program. It was a program we already had in place with a partner consultant, but it got expanded. The program really looks at the procurement side of things. So we're looking at making sure our sites are in the right rate groups. We're doing hedging programs. We are doing going out for tender in deregulated markets. A couple benefits to this program is that all of our utility invoices are being collected and paid by a single source. We have knowledgeable individuals that are actually looking at all of those invoices. Rather than it going to one of our accountants at one of our sites, it's going to somebody that actually understands how to read an invoice, and they question the utility or they'll question the site when they see something that's out of the norm on that bill, whether it be consumption, whether it be the rate we're being charged. All of that utility data then gets uploaded into a portal that anyone at Samuel that has the ability to get on and has authority to get on can take a look at utility bills. They can run reports to look at period consumption year over year, consumption costs, greenhouse gas reporting, heating degrees, cooling degree days. Those sites that have the proper metering, our interval data is all there. So all of that data really is at our fingertips, and that allows us to effectively manage our energy, and it's a critical piece to it. In 2018, we adopted an energy management policy. That policy was approved by our CEO and other members of our senior leadership. And then we, in 2018 as well, we had an opportunity to again work with our partner consultant, and we introduced what we call Energy Coach. And we piloted it at 11 different sites. They represented our larger users. And, they represented our larger users, and they had to form a cross-functional team at each site. It consisted of 4 to 5 people. They received 6 hours of training. It was all done through video conferencing over the internet. They worked with the consultant. They did an energy survey of all their larger users. They did baseline determination for the off shifts and on weekends. And then they also had to create a plan. And that plan was what they were going to do for the balance of the year to achieve a 5% savings, which was our target. Those plans then had to be presented to the other teams that were participating and our senior executive, and that was all done on camera, on video. They then reported quarterly out to the teams and to our senior executive, again, all on camera. And we found that this reporting and having to do it on camera really added a stickiness to the program. The program was a great success. We actually got approval to expand the program, and I'm happy to say we now have 34 sites that are participating in some sort of energy management at Samuel, out of over 100 sites. So the graph up there shows that as we've got more sites engaged, we've actually been able to increase our energy reduction, which has increased our greenhouse gas reduction and has increased our savings. So the results here really speak for themselves. I mentioned that we started this corporate program and we started getting data in. We really didn't have good data getting in the system until 2017. But the savings I show up there are strictly related to our corporate program, which had to do with the procurement side. As we started getting teams involved in the Energy Coach and our data was in the portal, you could see that we had savings in electricity consumption, in natural gas consumption, and the savings that I'm showing there in 2018 and 2019 are a combination of the savings we got through procurement, but also the savings that we got through the Energy Coach program. So what are we going to be doing in future? Well, we need to find a way to maintain the momentum that we've got with the teams. We need to find a way to get more people involved, more teams involved, and how we deal with those smaller sites that maybe this isn't the correct program to be in. And we still need to communicate. We have an intranet site that we call the Torch. The Torch is sort of Samuel's symbol, that we provide reporting and data out to those sites, out to everybody in Samuel, in fact. And we have what we call Energy 101, which is a monthly communication that goes out about energy-related topics. So, again, as my little buddy likes to say, energy consumption and costs are controllable. We really believe that at Samuel, and that's what we're trying to instill at all of our sites. So I would just like to take the opportunity, as people know when you're trying to put this type of program in, it's not one person or one team that is driving this. You need an executive sponsor. We're lucky at Samuel that we have that in Rod Crawford, who is our president of the manufacturing group. But then it also comes down to all the teams that are participating at a site level. All their hard work, their dedication, they have to be the cheerleaders for their sites. They're the ones that are spreading the word to the site people. And I'm lucky enough that I actually have here today representatives from 3 of our teams that are local. I guess it was an opportunity for them to see me in the hot seat presenting, because over the past couple of years, I've had the opportunity to see them in the hot seat, presenting their plans and presenting their updates. So thank you all very much for your dedication and hard work to this point and your continued involvement in the program. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you. Oh, sorry. I almost forgot as well. So I would just like to take the opportunity to introduce Carla Nell as our next speaker, who is with the Burlington Chamber of Commerce. Thank you.
Okay, great. Maybe Lynn can come on up. Good morning, everyone. Oh, I think I'm a little shorter than John. There we go. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you today. For those of you who haven't met me, my name is Carla Nell. I'm the new president and CEO of the Burlington Chamber of Commerce, having taken on this role just a little over 6 months ago now. So it certainly has been my pleasure to work with so many thought leaders and experts within our community, and particularly in the area of climate change, which is something that I am very passionate about. And I've been so encouraged by my experience with our membership and all of the incredible things that they are doing. So just in terms of a little bit of background, the Burlington Chamber currently represents approximately 900 businesses within the city who represent tens of thousands of employees, quite frankly. So our reach is quite broad, and we represent businesses of all shapes and sizes and across all sectors. And as I'm sure you can appreciate, many of our members are small and medium enterprises, which stands to reason given that 99.8% of all of the businesses in the country are defined within those two categories, having less than 500 employees. And interestingly enough, when we talk about the challenges and the opportunities that the business community faces, the issue of climate change and how can particularly small and medium enterprises, which make up so much of our economy, how can they play a role? How can they mitigate the risk? How can they adapt to seize upon the opportunities that climate change also presents? So I wanted to focus my remarks today on how the business community in Burlington is truly mobilizing, and to talk about some of the change agents that we have within our varied midst, who are role models for other organizations. And I firmly believe that you do have to see it in order to be it. And so rather than spending my limited time today, speaking about what our mandate is, and you can find more information at our website, I wanted to focus on the incredible innovation and the leadership that is being demonstrated by some of our very valuable members. And I've broken this into two themes to chat a little bit about today, building on the comments that, Bob provided and that significant food for thought that he offered. Because, again, I think as a chamber, we need to recognize success. So I wanted to highlight two incredible success stories, and we do have representatives of both of these organizations in the audience today, Spa in the Village, as well as Bateman McKay. So we've got Amber and Raquel and Emily and John. So please put your hands up so people can come and approach you afterwards and learn from what it is that you have done as champions within this space. So for those who may not be familiar, Spa in the Village is a day spa that provides a range of aesthetic and wellness services, and they are noted for business excellence. In fact, not only are they a chamber member, but they're also a finalist for our 2020 Business Excellence Awards because of the standard that they have achieved in service delivery. But what's also very unique and special about Spa in the Village is that they have gone green. So in an industry where there may be a perception of waste or other things that are associated with some of the services that are being delivered, Spa in the Village is in fact Green Circle certified. And this quarter alone, because of the best practices that they are implementing, their product selections, their recycling approach, they're going to be able to divert over 350 pounds of waste from landfills, which over time has a very significant cumulative effect. And not only are they focused on reduction, but many of their product lines are also eco-friendly. So, one of the things we need to celebrate is that as a small enterprise, self-directed, they have taken incredible initiative in this area. Another important success story is Bateman McKay, again, a firm of highly credible, reputable chartered accountants who are excellent at what they do. But moving beyond that, a number of their staff, volunteer ambassadors within their organization, stood up and wanted to lead and champion change. And Bateman McKay has invested significantly in retrofitting their physical plant, changing their business practices, adapting in order to mitigate the risk and decrease their carbon footprint. And so I think, when we look at these stories, we see not only a positive impact on the environment, we see cost savings being achieved, and we also see high rates and degrees of employee engagement, which are all very, very positive from a business perspective. And as a trend, we're seeing that increasingly employees are looking for organizations to work for that truly care about the impact of that operation on the environment. So at a time when the business community is greatly challenged by recruiting and retaining talent, there is also that additional benefit. Not only is it the right thing to do, not only are there cost savings to be achieved, but it can also add real value in terms of employee engagement as well. A couple of other stories I wanted to share with you this morning. I'm sure many of you have heard about the incredible building that's scheduled to open in the fall of 2020. Endress & Hauser, again, another 2020 Business Excellence Awards finalist, is building a new 40,000 square foot customer care center or facility in Burlington that is going to be net zero carbon. So it is a shining example of investment and innovation that again demonstrates that we are doing things in Burlington that are truly, truly innovative. There are also a number of organizations that I wanted to highlight for you today that are also adapting the services that are offered and delivered to help others achieve their environmental objectives. And we have Sean Brady in the room as well from Efficiency Capital, which is an organization that works to develop energy efficient projects. And they've worked with organizations like the Harborfront Center, the YMCA of Greater Toronto, other developers of multi-unit residential properties to ensure that buildings can be properly retrofitted in order to achieve cost savings. And what's very unique about the work that Efficiency Capital does is that it is a systematic, highly structured approach that involves an audit of how to basically achieve a company's technical needs, financial needs as it relates to eco-friendly development. It involves ensuring that those who want to pursue in this area have access to the capital that is required to invest in the building. It manages the installation of any equipment, et cetera, that may need to be made in order to achieve the energy efficiency objectives of the organization in question. And then finally, and this is so important, they also participate in the measurement and the verification of the positive impact of this change. And there's a very powerful saying that if you measure it, you can manage it, and what gets managed gets done. So I encourage you again, I know we're short on time today, to speak to Sean Brady about what they're doing. One other final example that I wanted to share with you is TerraPure. Again, a Burlington-based organization that is capitalizing on the opportunities that climate change presents to offer innovative solutions to assist companies with minimizing their environmental impact. And so TerraPure has done some incredibly innovative things. They provide advanced waste management solutions to a variety of industries. Their services focus on environmental solutions, organic solutions, battery recycling, among other things. They are award-winning and have been recognized around the globe for the work that they are doing in this space. And just one example of where their focus and emphasis on innovation has made a true impact is in relation to the mining industry. And I don't know if everyone in the room is familiar with what mine tailings are, but mine tailings are the extremely nasty, toxic stuff, not the overburden that is removed to facilitate extraction, but the leftovers, if you will, the residual, the waste that occurs when we're extracting ore. It's highly toxic, so much so that mine tailings have traditionally had to be stored in a way that they are permanently isolated from the environment. TerraPure, as part of the work that they are doing, has invented a solution that treats with biosolids mine tailings that is going to allow for reclamation and revegetation of areas where this awful toxic waste would have previously been stored. Again, another amazing example of how businesses within our community are adapting in order to seize upon the opportunity. So my question to all of you is, how is your business positioning itself in order to mitigate risk and adapt to and seize upon some of the opportunities that climate change presents? We all have a shared responsibility in this vein. And the Burlington Chamber of Commerce is very invested in this area. We're working to develop a partnership with the Burlington Economic Development Corporation, the Burlington Green, as well as Sustainable Hamilton and Halton, to try to ensure that we can support our members as they focus on this issue. We appreciate the fact that business owners and operators are oftentimes so busy working in the business that it's hard to carve out the time to work on the business. And so we applaud those who have made this a priority, but we also want to ensure that we provide support and tools and resources and examples and leadership in this area so that other leaders within the community can similarly follow. We're working on developing a database within our membership directory that focuses on and emphasizes those businesses that are participating in the clean sector, that are offering eco-friendly solutions, so that those who may want to make purchasing decisions have access to that repository of providers who are very, very focused within this particular area. We also work very closely with the Ontario Chamber as well as the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and we have Trevor McPherson in the room from the Ontario Chamber. Again, this is indeed a priority for our broader chamber network, that business community across the province as well as across the country. And on a much smaller scale, I just wanted to share with you that we as a chamber have also looked very carefully and closely at our operations and asked ourselves, what can we do to mitigate the risk of the services that we provide to our members? And so late last year, we implemented a digital first strategy. It used to be that we produced great volumes of paper as a means of sharing information with our members. And in a very short period of time, we have been able to achieve and realize thousands of dollars in savings just by not pressing print and by distributing information through other channels to our membership. We've also achieved incredible efficiencies. So, with all of that said, and again, I know we've got limited time today, I wanted to leave you with this final thought. We truly need courageous leaders within our community to lead this change. And I encourage you not to wait for the right opportunity, but to be part of creating it for the business community. We look forward to working with all of you, to pursuing other partnerships that will allow us as a business community to achieve our objectives and to be leaders within this space. And certainly I encourage you to reach out to us if you have insights to share so that we can further share that with all of our business members.